Yes. All right. Yes. Welkom, everybody. Welkom. Goedenavond voor de Nederlandstaligers. We gaan dadelijk over in het Engels. Een kleine introductie over deze voor ons eerste online event. We zitten in live events van Microsoft. Dat werkt iets anders dan Teams. We hebben een Q&A. En ik moet nog even wennen aan het feit dat er even een kleine lag is tussen het een en het ander. Er zit een seconde of 10 tussen wat ik zeg en wat ik hoor. Dus plotseling hoor ik mezelf weer terugpraten. Vanavond gaan we het hebben over data preparation tricks. You should know for Power BI solutions. By Reza. I don't think I need to introduce Reza because he's one of the most famous persons in life. It's yes, and to get on with it, I'd just like to start directly with it. If you have questions, you can ask it in the Q&A. Chris Woldring will render those, will moderate those. So for this one, I think it's better now to switch to Reza and then start the session. We have questions at the end.
Great. Thank you, Henk. Should I start or?
You can start.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining this meeting. I guess it is like a little bit late evening for you, early morning for me. We managed to find a time that works for both time zones. Thanks, Henk, Chris, and everyone in the organization committee of Power BI Netherlands user group for giving me the opportunity. Now let me share my screen as well.
Reza?
Yes.
Just a little. Can you turn off your sound, because there's a roundup of sounds.
Okay, I can turn off my speaker. Is it like? But then how can I check is it better or not? So let me just see. Does it look better now? Yes, no. Is it better? Okay. I hope it is better. So I'll continue. Let me share my screen. Screen 1 it is. Yep, that looks like it. Okay, just let me know when you can see my screen. And I'll do from current slide. Okay. Can you see the screen?
You have shared the screen. Just a second.
All right. Delay. Yep. Okay.
I'll let you know. It's on for now.
Great. Okay. Thank thank you. Thank you again for attending this session. This session is some of the data preparation tricks that I thought are like some of the most common tricks you would use in a Power BI solution. I bundled them up in like a demo style, so it would be more a session of demos. I'm not that much of a slide person. I usually do a lot of demos. So this is what this session is going to be, a little bit about myself. I'm Reza Rad. I'm working at Radicad as a coach, consultant, trainer on Power BI. I've written some books on Power BI, and some of them, like Power BI from Rookie to Rockstar, is available in Radicad website. Feel free to go and download it. Below this slide, you'll see my contact information, and I'll share the slides to Hank and team so they can share it with you later on. But as I said, not much of information in the slide. I'm mainly doing sessions. However, slides are good for contact information. Anyway, right, what I'm going to explain, I said it's like a set of demos. So these are demos that I'm going to show you. First, I'm showing you through get data from email, some filtering files experience, cleaning data, data type changes, and things like that. Get data from email itself is not something that might happen common, but the part that is happening quite common is filtering data, cleaning data, doing data type changes based on different locale and things like that. I'll show you that. I'll show you also an example of record locator when you have like files with different names, how you can still get data without a problem with that scenario, with different sheet name, let's say. I'll explain also pivot and unpivot as two quite useful transformations. And I'll explain also what is a mirror table in Power BI, how we can use it to create flattened dimension, and what is the difference of that with append, which is a way to create a consolidated tables. As you see, these are not like, some of them are not really advanced transformations, but they are transformations that can be quite helpful in many scenarios, right? So let's jump into the demos then. The first demo I want to show you is the get data from email. Now I'll start that with a Power BI get data experience. And you might have used this feature if you have your email as a Microsoft Exchange email or Office 365 or anything like that. You can actually use this experience of get data, and then you can choose from the other section here. You can choose this to be from Microsoft Exchange. So here I can choose Exchange, and I can provide the email address here, download at radicad.com. Right. And you need to enter credential. I already did that. After entering credential, you would be able to access all your email, let's say, information, which can be the calendar, meetings, things like that. You might have the mails itself, meeting requests, people that you have in your Outlook, added tasks that you have over there as well, right? I'm looking at the mail, so I'll select the mail part here, right? When I select the mail, and let's say I also go to transform data, used to be called edit queries, now called transform data, right? So here I can go and see all the emails that came through this mail account. Now, this is not my main account, so you see not that many emails, only 482 email rows, but it would be every single email. It would not be only my inbox, it would be even in sent box and things like that. So if it is an email that I sent, I would be able to see that as well, right? And if you have other folders, you would be able to see all of those, right? So definitely it's like the entire emails that you have, and you will see the subject of email, everything like that. I can see even the email sender, which comes as a record. A record in Power Query is a structured data set itself is one row, multiple columns. If I click on record, I'll see that what is the name of sender, what is the email address of that sender, right? So I get all of these information, and one of those information which is quite useful for me here is the attachment. So two columns, one is has attachment, another one is the attachments itself, right? So imagine this scenario. Let's say I have some files coming to my emails on a scheduled basis, right? Like every month, at the end of the month, there is a CSV file, there's an Excel file, including some of the information comes to my email from a specific sender. I can filter this information to that and then extract those information into my Power BI file without needing any extra component, right? With some filtering options here, right? So now let's say I'm going to do filtering on this, and I'm using this subject as a subject I'm going to filter. So I'm going to filter and say, okay, give me anything that actually the subject equals this. So this filters down my records to this. Now I have already 2 emails with this information. Now these 2 emails have been sent like I guess, yeah, 2nd of February, as you can see here, right? This is the US time zone, and I intentionally put it at the US time zone because of another part of demo a little bit later. I'll get to that, but this is 2nd of February, right? Now let's say I'm looking at anything after that, right? So I want to say, okay, send me everything that, show me everything that is, let's say, after, and I can say here, for example, let's say after 10th of May, which obviously I won't have anything, right? Now, I'll open my email account just to send an email. Let me just bring it here so you can see as well. So I'm going to send an email to here with the same subject line and one of those CSV files as a sample. I'll just bring that sample here in a second. So let's say, for example, I have this CSV file and I'm sending it here, right? So as soon as that sent is done, I would be able to refresh this and get that coming. It takes a few seconds for that to be sent. No, not yet. Yeah, here you go. Right, so you see that I have that email coming into my filtering criteria, and even I can filter it based on the sender. Like, for example, if I only want this to come from this specific sender, I can expand this sender and filter it by the sender address, right? In this case, I'm always getting this from this email, so I don't really need any filtering, right? So another filtering for me would be because I might have also some email without attachment. So another filtering criteria for me would be give me everything that has an attachment, right? The attachment to be true. Like, for example, if I have another email with the same title to the same account, but without any attachment, if I have that, I don't want that to be included, which right now is already included. So I would say only give me those that has an attachment, right? The has attachment is true, right? Okay, so this way I managed to filter down my data to get to the email that I want, but what actually I'm looking for is this file, right? The attachments of that email, not the email itself. The email itself is not important for me. The attachment of that is important. So what I'll do is I'll say remove other columns. As you see, these are like some basic transformations, but quite useful. So remove other columns. Then here I see the table, which if I don't click on the table, if I click somewhere on this blank cell, I see the details of this here. This is one good way of seeing the details of this table, rather than if you click on the table, it will navigate down to the table like a drill down, right? So here I can see the details of that table. Now, because this table might be later on more than one row, I don't click on the table. I use this option to say expand that table. And I expand it to all underlying columns. So I uncheck this like attachments because that would come at the beginning of every one of these attachments.name, attachments.extension, and things like that, which I don't want to. So I'll say just expand it without using original column names as a prefix. And here it is. I would have one record like this per each attachment in my email. Consider that if I have one email with 2 attachments, this would have had 2 rows right now, right? And I will send an email with 2 attachments in a second, so I can show you what happens, right? So as you see here, I have the name of attachment, extension, all the information like that, and anything that I need is already here, right? Now let me just go one step further and send that email with 2 attachments. So again, to my email over there, this time I'm sending 2 attachments. Right, you see I have 2 attachments. It is one email, but it has 2 attachments. So here, if I refresh it, I should have 3 rows, like 1 from the first email and 2 from the other emails, right? Which if I didn't expanded this table correctly, let me go and find that step that I expanded the table. Here, if I didn't expanded that table correctly, it wouldn't have expanded it to all of this. If I only clicked on the first table, it would have bring only the first email's attachment. So that is why I did that expand at that stage, right? So here I have all of the attachments. And let's say I'm only interested again in this column, which is the actual file, right? Now let me show you what these files is. By the way, these files look like this, right? These files are some Fitbit activities. Fitbit is like the activity tracker, wristband. You go and walk 10,000 steps a day and things like that. You can actually download your activities from the Fitbit website. These are some of my activities. You have like 1 row per day with some like header rows and things like that, right? And I have 1 file per month. So what I want to do, these files, I want to actually extract those information, which is in the actual content of the file in this column, right? I don't really care about other columns. So what I'll do is I'll remove other columns, right? Now in Power BI, we have such a really useful feature which you can actually expand. You can actually combine files together, which is this little thing over here. If you read files from a folder, or if you have some files in a binary format in one column, you can easily click on this. And that would try to combine these files, which uses some behind the scene like methods to look at one file, creating a function for all other files, then combining them together and building like a consolidated output, right? So here it asks me what file I want to use as a sample, and default is first file. I'm just going to use that for now. These are CSV files. In case I want to change some configuration here, I can do that. I'm happy with all of these configuration. I just click on OK. Right now, everything would happen with this by itself. So here it would create a function behind the scene. That function process the first file. So here is the function. It accepts the first file as a parameter, process that first file. This is the query that runs for that function. And the final result is here, the consolidated list having all of these 3 files in one, as you can see here, right? So quite simple, quite useful, and I have everything in one place, right? Without any problem. Now, before going to more data cleaning part, I explain one more thing here. Let's say I have 1 more email coming. So far, you learned that if I have as many as emails coming, it would be all absolutely fine because I have them all listed here, right? Now I'm going to send another email. In this email, I'm going to do some nasty things, like I'm going to add one of the files that I had previously and 1 new file, let's say. I don't really remember which one I added, which one I didn't, but I think this is a new file. And also, I'm going to add like a signature in this file, right? And my signature has some images and things like that, right? So let's send this one. Now I'm going to refresh this, and that file should also come if the email transaction is complete, hopefully. But the problem is that this time I would have a little different output. Yeah, I guess this is already came. Yeah, it is. So you see that I have some like really funny characters list over here, and these are, as you might already have guessed, is because of that signature, because I had images in that signature. So these are like binary, whatever format of that signature file it is. I don't want this data, right? This should be filtered out. But what stage this should be filtered out? The stage that I had all of those files as the attachments, the stage that I expanded those, I should go and find those. That is usually good practice to go and rename these steps to their to a name that you can easily distinguish in the future. In this case, I know it was expanded attachment, so I go to that step, right? And here I see all the attachments, and you can see that this is not just CSV file, I also have some PNG and JPG files. They are attachments, right? So the fact is that they are attachments, so they will be combined. In that case, I don't want to do that, so I'll say extension give me only CSV files, right? You see, these are all simple filtering options. So here I get CSV files. Now there is another thing. Remember, I told you that I'm going to have one file repeated, and here is that file, right? You see that this file and this file is exactly the same. I can actually remove that as well. There is one thing in Power Query quite useful. You already have used it, I guess, a lot, which is remove duplicates. Remove duplicates by default will keep the first one and will remove the next one. Now you might say, okay, the one that I get latest is the most reliable, so I want to use that. In that case, you can order it by the modified date descending, right? So this would come first, and then remove duplicate, right? Selecting this column, saying remove duplicates, and I'm inserting these steps in the middle of this. So here then I would have this one, which is sent just like a few minutes ago before the other one, right? And now if I click on my final step, I would have only those files content. Still it needs cleanup, but it is only file contents. I don't have any of those binary, whatever it is, right? So this is like simple data filtering practice. Now let me show you some of the data cleanup things as well. This data obviously is not clean. You see the rows with includes activities, which is like not only in one file, in multiple files. How can I get rid of those? Of course, I can get rid of those in this editor, but it would be definitely much better if I go and do it in the function itself. This is quite useful trick to know because Power Query already created that function for you. And when the function is created, there is always an accompanied Power Query beside that, which you can go and click on it and do the transformation in there. The final result would have those as a combined version, right? So if I want to remove activities in every file, why not going here, which is done only for one of the files, and then removing activities from here. Now removing activities from here is just as simple as this. Remove rows, remove top rows, top one row. You see the row with activities is gone. And now if I go to this one, mail, which is the combined list, you see that row with activities is gone from everywhere, right? And I can use the same thing for these blank rows.
Exactly. Just pop in for just a few seconds because sure, you're running way ahead from what you're showing.
Okay.
You talk a little bit too fast in what's been shown. I'll wait just a little second, and then we continue if everything is on the same line, because you clearly walk a little bit faster than the question. And I think we'll at the moment where you are. So continue, please.
Okay, I'll go a little bit slower for sure. Thank you, Hank. Right. So here you can see that I also have like these blank rows. Now, one way to get rid of these blank rows is remove rows, remove blank rows, which is a little bit different from clicking on a column, remove empty, because if you say remove empty on a column, you are removing any row that has only empty values in that column itself. Remove blank rows, look at the entire row, all columns to be blank to get that removed. That is just the difference in case you would like to know. Now going back to my consolidated list, consolidated table, mail includes everything with no blank rows, right? Now here comes the not tricky part, but interesting part. You see that this row, date, colors, burn, steps, stances, this is actually my column headers, right? And if I change that in that function, it is going to break that final result. The main reason is that this function is returning a table with things called column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. In Power Query, there are some transformations that are column dependent, right? So if you are not using transformations that are column dependent, then you would be fine with just changing it. If you are using, then it would be a bit of problem. So let me first do this and then we'll see how to deal with it. I'll go to transform, use first row as header, very useful option to bring this row at the top. So this will make it the column headers like that, but then you see that this is failing, right? Now you might wonder why this is failing. When I go to this one, I see the error message saying that there is no column called column 1, right? Now, the reason for that is that in this query, in the combined query, I have a step. And in that step, especially change type is one of those steps, it is hard coding the transformation of data types in each column. You see here that it says, for example, column 5 is a text, column 10 is that, column 1 is this, right? This is hard-coded information. It is looking for a column named column 1, right? So what I'm going to do is just to remove this step and everything would be back to normal. I won't have a proper data type, of course, but I'm going to change it in a second, right? So in case you see some errors like this, most of those are because of column specific data transformation, which you can find it in the formula bar usually when you see that formula has something with the column name. Okay, so that was some filtering. So you've seen filtering, you've seen cleaning. I've explained some data cleaning experience for you as well. Now let me talk about the data type changes. Of course, for every column, you can click on a column header and change it to a different data type. But here comes the another interesting part. Let's say I want to change the date, right? Now, date in particular, or sometimes number as well, depends on what locale you are, can be different. If you look at these dates, they are in the format of day, month, year, right? The format that usually we use often. However, in the United States, they don't use this format. They use month, day, year, right? And intentionally, I set my machine to be using the US format just to show you what happens in this scenario. So my US format is, my machine format is a US format. It's month, day, year, but the data is day, month, year. So what happens if here I come and say, change it to date? It would apply that change, but it won't be a correct date data type change. As you can see here, it would consider the first character as a month. So it works for the first 12 months because we have 12 months, but as soon as it gets to number 13, because we don't have really month number 13 and anything further, we'll get an error, right? So this is not a proper date conversion, right? Now, if you always expect these date formats to come in this way, you can go and actually change it in the options and settings options of your file. There is a regional setting. You can change it to be English New Zealand or anything like that you want, right? In your case, Netherlands, Dutch, anything, right? But the thing is that sometimes you expect files with different format of date coming. In that case, you can actually do it here. So let me show you how you can change the data type regardless of the locale of your system or locale of the file. When I change the date, there is an option called using locale here, quite useful. So I use that. Then I specify what data type change I want to use, which would be date. Just date itself. Yeah. And then I choose the locale that these inputs are coming from. In this case, this is like English, New Zealand. I'm going to just find that New Zealand. We should have a New Zealand somewhere. Oh, this is French, sorry. So English, New Zealand, here you go. Right, and it shows me also like how this looks like. So I click on OK, and it would be transformed to a date type. Sorry, I should have closed my email after that demo. It shows me the date transformed correctly. Now you see that when it is transformed, it is in the US format, month, day, year. But this is because my machine shows every proper date in US format because my machine is configured in US format. The main thing is that this column from now on is a date column. If I save this file, if I send it to you, you are living, let's say, in Netherlands with totally different date format, or someone in US with different format. It would work everywhere without any problem because in my transformation, I have that date data type change using that locale. This is part of my transformation, right? And for the rest of these columns, because they are all normal for my local locale, I just select them all. This is one easy and good way to change the data type of all columns at the same time. Select them all, under transform, detect data types, right? Instead of going and setting data type for each of those. And this would automatically do the data type for all of those. I didn't do that for the first column because that was on a different locale, but everything else just like that, right? So using this method, I managed to get all of my email attachments expanded into one big table, cleaned, ready to be analyzed, right? This was the first demo I wanted to show you. Now let's look at the second one, which is a record locator. For the second one, I'm going to show you another way of getting data, and let me first show you the data source itself. I have a bunch of Excel files, right? Which is like same data, basically. I just saved it as Excel because I wanted to show you this as a different example. Let me open just one of these. These are Excel files, right? So same data as I said. The only thing is that each Excel file has a different sheet name. For example, this Excel file, the sheet name is this, 2016-07. But if I open another Excel file, 2016-08, right? The sheet name is different. But they are all located in one folder. Their data is different. Their structure is exactly the same. And what I want to do is to actually get data from this folder, combine them all. I'm not going to select them one by one because that would be like a big problem. I have to do manually a lot of steps. So what I'll do is I'll select this folder path, and I'm going to here, new source. You probably have seen this ability to get data from a folder. I'm going to use that. Very useful option. You just specify the folder name. It will go through the process of seeing all the files in that folder and combining it, right? Now I can say combine these and transform data. Now, when I say combine and transform data, it will go through the same process like what you have seen for that email, which consider one of those files as a template, in this case, first file, or I can choose any of these files. Now here comes the tricky part. For that sample file, it is looking at finding what is the sheet that contains data for that file. Obviously, for first file, this is the sheet name is this, but this is not the sheet name for other files. So I'm probably going to get an error, but that's okay. Let me just do that. I'll select that. I click on OK, and this should bring that result for me in a second. Yep, here it is coming. It needs some cleaning and things like that. But the main thing here is this error you see in this row. Right. It only processed the first file. You see, I have only 32 rows, which is only the first file. Everything after that comes with an error, right? And the error is saying that, like, when it wants to process the second file, there is no sheet name 2016-05, right? 2016-05 was only exist in the first sheet, in the first Excel file, not in the second one or the third one. So how can I combine Excel sheets that their sheet name are different, but still I want to use this method of combining files in a folder. I don't want to go to each file and get it, because later on when new files comes in, I have to do a lot of manual steps. So again, you can do that in the function that builds your query. So the function that builds my query is here in this folder. The previous one was for email. This is for get data from file. Now I'm going to this function that actually builds that table, right? This is the function. When I look at the function, it has a few steps, right? Here are my steps. One of those steps is the navigation step, right? If I go just one step up, you see that in the navigation step, in the formula bar, I see that I'm getting data from a sheet, and that sheet name is this. So obviously, if I'm looking at a file that doesn't have this sheet name, it's going to fail, right? So this is not the right way of navigation here. What I would do instead is a little bit different. Now let me go one step back so I show you what I mean by doing it a little bit different. Before navigating, in my case, every file has one sheet, right? Not more than that. Right? So when I look at the file, every row here would be one sheet. Now imagine if I had a file like this. Let's say if the file was this sheet and 2, 3 more, right? In this case, if I had something like this, this would have come with 4 rows here, right? One representing each of those sheets. Now, the order of these would be also the order of sheets here, which then I can go and point at them with an index, right? Consider the first one to be 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And moving forward. So if I always expect my data to come in the first sheet, I can always go and say, pick the record 0, right? Now, how you can say that in Power Query to say like pick the record 0. Now in Power Query, we have a character which is more like a record locator. The way that the current navigation works is based on a filtering, right? You see that it says whatever that table source table was, give me the record that has the sheet name this, give me the data column of that, right? This part inside the curly bracket is actually where I can put my record index instead of the whole thing. So I can do it this way. I can say replace this part, and I'm going to delete all of that, right? But now I need a record locator. I need to say, okay, which record I'm looking at. If it is always the first sheet, it would be record number 0, and that would give me exactly the same output, right? Because in this file, of course, I'm looking at the same data, right? So nothing actually changed here, apart from the fact that I changed that filter criteria based on a name now to a filter criteria based on a location, or say, let's say a record locator. However, the big change is here. Now, when I go to the combined result, everything just works fine without any error. Of course, I need data cleaning, but I don't have any error and all the files are loaded just fine, right? So with just a simple change in the way that I navigated in one of the files, I managed to fix the entire combined result set, right? Okay, so I think it's a good point to have a look if there is any questions before moving to the next demos.
There are questions.
Okay,
so let's start with the first one. If you look at the Exchange server connector, is a scheduled refresh with this connector possible? Question.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yes.
All right. Another one. Reza, do you prefer using the automatically create function, or e.g. with reading multiple Excels, adding a custom column like below, and then expand it manually? So we got an automatically function, or you can do it manually. What is your preference in this?
I mean, if the automatic function is created in a, let's say, way that it can help reducing my steps, I start with that, but then I go and edit it like what you have seen in this example. Like the function did provide something for me. It wasn't like the best I wanted. I went and added and edited a little bit of like transformations in it. I usually do that in this way, unless like the function is like totally useless for me in some scenarios that I have really custom format of a data. In those cases, or if it is not, let's say, get data from a folder or things like that, in those cases, I go and create that function from scratch.
Okay. Thank you. Another question from Dennis. Reza, I had a similar situation with multiple text files, like in your example. However, somewhere were in completely different data types, and not in two, but in just around the globe, quite a lot of different data types.
Yes.
Is there any way to do that? Because if he used the local settings, that doesn't work at all. So is there a way to do partly local settings?
So I guess the best way would be like when data comes from all different locations with different locale settings, the best way would be having also like a mapping table somewhere that says like this file comes in this format, this file comes in this format, this file comes in this format. And then in your Power Query, you have a set of transformations that look at the mapping table and transform the file based on the locale of that. You need something as simple as this. Let me just show you 1 second. So the place that I did that locale thing. So you need something as simple as that. Like, for example, in my mapping table can say like this file is en-nz, this file is, I don't know, en-us, things like that. And then this column type transform can read that when converting it. So in that way, then you would have everything automatic. All
right. Thank you very much. That were for this moment the questions.
Okay, great.
The next thing we have time left, so tell me, you have more to show. Go ahead.
I have a few more demos, but I guess we have only 15 minutes, right? So I'll only do those demos that are, let's say, most important. I'll probably do merge and append instead of pivot and non-pivot. Okay, so let me show you those as well. Now, I believe you still can see my screen. So considering the transformations in Power Query, two of those which are quite useful, I mean, very, let's say, basic transformation, but very useful, are merge and append. If you come from database background, you kind of have experience with these two, and you can distinguish between these two, what they are doing. But most of Power BI users these days, they are not always coming from the database, relational database background. So it is always good to understand how these two are actually working. So I'm showing you these as two separate demos. The first one, I'm going to build a product table, right? I'm going to get that data from an Excel file. I think I already have it from recent sources. Yep, here it is. So I'm using this Excel file, which I have a product table, a product category table, a product subcategory table. I select them all, 3, and bring it here. Now these are my 3 tables. I always recommend to have your tables in proper folder structure. I can move these to a group. That is how you can create folders in Power Query. If you haven't used it, very simple. It's called group, but in fact it is folder, right? So a new group, let me call it product tables. And there are different standards how you want to move these into groups. Some people put these in groups related based on their source input. Some people put it in different groups. I always have a group called like final query, which is where my final output queries would be stored. But anyway, that is like some standards. Now I have these 3 tables, the product table, which has all the columns for the product, the subcategory of products, and the product category itself, right? Now, building a BI solution, one of your jobs is to make that relationship between tables simpler, easier, faster in terms of responding to your reporting queries, right? If I have these 3 tables separately loading into Power BI, I can create a relationship between them. There is no problem, but it won't be ideal because these 2, subcategory and category, they can be added as a column inside my dim product table, right? This is a concept, we call it like a star schema design to flatten or dimension tables instead of like bringing them all, creating relationships that might cause sometimes creating like both directional relationship, slow performance and things like that, right? So I'm going to flatten them all in one table. How can I do that? I can do that with a merge queries. So merge query is a very good option for flattening your tables, especially when you have like a joining field, a link field between these that you can match. Some of the rows, of course, would match, some of them won't match, but still you can use it, right? Using merge, you are increasing the number of columns that you have mostly, but not essentially the number of rows. The number of rows might not change, or it might change, depends on how the matching works. If you have like more than one matching per row and things like that, right? So the whole purpose of merge is to flatten the structure of multiple tables. Now here I'm going to merge these. So I'll start with product table and I say merge queries as new because I want to keep my product table as is. Merge queries as new. I select the second table, which would be product subcategory. And then I say, OK, merge these based on the product subcategory key in the first table and the product subcategory key in the second table. And you can see that there are some null values in the first table, right? So they are not all matching. And merge also has some other options. I'm not going to use those for now. I just click on OK. When I merge these tables, there will be a new query created, which is the result of a merge, with one column at the end, which is the product subcategory details, right? This is like the sub table. In the most of the first rows, this is empty because I had a lot of subcategories with null values. If I go like down quite a lot, I see some rows with a subcategory, right? So now what I would do is I would expand this. From the underlying table, I need the English product subcategory name. And I also need product category key because I'm using that to join to the product category table, right? So I can choose those columns that I want from the other table after the merge. I would do that. Here it is. And as I said, these are null for the first a few hundred rows, but after that, I see some values. Now, as the next step, I would also merge it again, this time with the product category table, saying that the product category key here, which is the column I fetched from that expand after the merge, should match the product category key here, right? And then expanding this again as well. This time I just need English product category name, right? And again, we have like null values, of course, right? If you want just to show matching, there is an option when you merge it. You can say like inner join, things like that. Those are options at the time of merge. But in this case, I want everything, so I would just go ahead with the current merge criteria. After doing this, I don't really need product category key. This is like a key. I mainly need the description information, so I remove this column. This is one of the good things about Power Query, that you can use a column for further transformation, but at the later stages, then you go and remove that column because you don't need it anymore, right? I remove that column. And also at the beginning, product subcategory key, I don't need this as well, so I remove that column, right? So now I have one single product table with all the product columns in it. Plus, at the end, it also has product category and product subcategory all in one table. There is no need for me to have 3 tables loaded into Power BI, create 2 extra relationships between these 3 tables. Sometimes I might need both directional relationship and things like that. I flattened that structure into one using the merge. After merge, I'm going to call this product. And here comes the really interesting one, that right now, if I load this data into Power BI, all of these 4 tables will be loaded into Power BI. But what we need is only the product table. These 3 tables are extra. I mean, they are used to generate product table, but they are not tables that you would normally load because they are additional information. You cannot delete them. If I right click and delete, it says you cannot delete because it is used in the other table. And if you load it, it uses extra memory. So what you can do is right click on these tables, very important, and disable this option, enable load. Very simple again, but very important. I have seen a lot of Power Query solutions, Power BI solutions performance problem because of this, because you just load extra data into Power BI when you don't need it, right? So I can say disable load for this and for this. And when I do that, you see that it is like the font style changed a little bit to italic for these. That means those 3 won't be loaded, only this one would be loaded, right? This is how you would use a merge operation in Power BI. There are some other use cases as well, like you want informations that are in this table, but not in the other table. Those are things that you can change with the type of merge. When you merge it, there are like 6 different types of merge, inner join, left anti, and things like that, right? So that is the merge operation. I guess I don't have much time for the next demo, so we might just stop it here. Hank, what do you think?
Yes, we're a bit inside of the time frame now.
Okay.
Yeah, well, let's see if we have a question left over here. The question at this moment is a question about dates. When I change the Power Query date column to a short version, e.g. 11/05/2020, after close and apply, the date changes in Power BI desktop to Monday, 11th of May 2020. And so every time I have to change them back to the 11/05/2020. Is there a custom solution that I don't have to change the date every time?
So good question. The thing that you need to always consider is that In Power Query, we have data types, right? We don't have a format of a column. We have just the data type. In Power BI, when you load this into Power BI, in Power BI, you also have a data type, but you also have something else beside the data type, which is the format string, the format that that column is presented. So you have a date column in Power Query, you load it in Power BI. It is a still date column, but it's represented differently. For example, it shows like Monday, 23rd of whatever year, right? That is the format configuration, and you cannot really do format configuration in Power Query unless you go and change the date column to be a text column, which is not favorable because then you would end up with a lot of other issues if you are doing data analysis on your column, right? So my advice is always in Power BI, set a proper format for your date column or any other columns that you want, and you can use some format strings with that. There is a like custom format string options for that, and then that way you would always have a like same experience in Power BI when you look at those columns.
Right, that's a good answer. There's another question coming around. Merge as new creates a completely new table, or does it only show the merge? So you use merge as new.
Yeah.
And to be very honest, it creates a new table because that was the table you loaded at the end.
Yeah.
So merge as new creates a completely new table.
Yes, it would create completely new table, but if you use this method I mentioned here, like disable the load of the previous tables, then those tables are not loaded. So this would be, let's say, your only table, let's say this way.
Yes, but it is a new table.
Yes, it is. That is the difference between merge as new or merge queries. If I use merge queries, I'm using the existing table to be a result of the merge.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Another question from Jorrit. When and why would you flatten tables? Is it not more common practice to have dimension tables separate? So it's more the discussion about having a star scheme or a snowflake
schema design. Yep. Okay. So I would say for most of your descriptive tables, as long as they are related to the same entity, you need to combine them. I have an article about how to find what is a dimension. For example, just giving you some explanation. If I have customer table and I also have like customer's job title, right? Then I would combine it into one file, right? Because job title is part of customers' attributes, right? When I want to slice and dice data, I would slice and dice it by job title. If I'm not building a HR BI analysis, because in HR, I would also probably like to see how their jobs changes through the time. In that case, job changes is more like a fact table rather than job being an attribute of a dimension customer, right? Or product and product color. Color is an attribute of a product. If you add color to the product table, you are not increasing the rows of a product. It is still the same number of rows, let's say 1000 products. You still have the same number of products. You are adding one extra column into your product dimension. The beauty of that is that later on in Power BI, when you want to slice and dice something by product color, you don't have to go and fetch another table, create a relationship between product and product color. You have it already in the product table. You are reducing the need for both directional relationships a lot with this structure, which we call it star schema design. However, you should not like flatten everything. I cannot flatten my customer table with product table. These are like totally separate entities. They would be related when a sales transaction is made. And that sales transaction is what we call as a fact table, right? So there is some like rules, but the main thinking is that as long as those entities attributes are related together, we usually flatten them as one dimension.
All right. We still have a little room left for other questions. There are still 4 questions left over here. Dan asked if possible, would you always prefer to combine your fact and dimension tables in one? And what are the benefits versus the costs?
Definitely not combine fact and dimensions. One of the practices that you should avoid for sure is that avoid flattening your fact tables, because that would end up a really huge table, right? A fact table usually is a big table in your data set. It's like, let's say, transactions of 20 years and things like that. Don't flatten it with other dimensions. Keep your fact table separate. Usually dimensions comes around that as like a star schema. They have one-to-many relationship to the fact table. They can filter your fact table, but fact table itself should not be flattened. One reason is that it makes it huge, it makes it big. Another problem is that later on, if you add another fact table, let's say this is your fact actual, fact sales. Later on, you have fact budget. And that is like totally different granularity. This is by day, that is by month, let's say, right? Now, that fact budget also needs to work with some of the dimensions, right? So this is, for example, a fact that is connected to product category. That is also a fact connected to product category. So are you going to bring product category in this table and product category in that table? No, you are going to have a shared dimension, product category, and have these two fact tables working with that. In that case, if you use that product category in a slicer, it is going to slice and dice both fact tables, right? Rather than flattening everything in one big fat fact table, you should have your fact tables isolated, quite, let's say, narrow in terms of the columns, but deep in terms of the number of rows that you have, and dimensions separately. So dimensions, flattening, fact tables, not flattening. Okay, I guess Hank is disconnected. Do we have any other questions, Chris, in the meantime? I can show you like this last. Yeah,
hear me?
okay. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can
Hi,
see Hank also joined.
Oh, okay. I will give the word to Hank then.
Something went wrong. I was just thrown out.
Yeah.
Yes, well, it's something like that. But let's say this is this was a good session. Thank you very much for everything you have said. Laila will be here tomorrow, so we're very anxious to see her on it and do her session, which goes about the charticulator. It sounds a bit French, but it's rather interesting, I think. I want to thank you again for being here, and to be very honest, for the rest of the people that's still around. Your local time now will be something like 7 o'clock in the morning. So I might think you will go to bed after the session. Thank you again.
You know.
Thank you again for bringing this in. We will bring in the records of it. It will come to you automatically. Thank you. And with that, I think we will end this session.
Thank you. Just one thing before closing it down. So this slide I just shared in my screen right now. All of these demos that I showed you, I wrote articles, blog articles, and I usually also have a YouTube video accompanying that. So go to Radacat website and check it out. Also, we have the Radacat Academy, bunch of video courses, more than 170 hours of content over there. And for Power BI user group here, I have created a coupon, like a coupon that this like red one is a coupon. This gives you first free month access to Radacat Academy, but only for the first 10 people. So be fast in registering it. And yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yep. Thank you very much. And I'll hope to see you soon in the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Hank.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris, and hope to see you in the future. Looking forward for Leila's sessions tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. Bye,
Cheers.
everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.